order. And Mr. Batzel, if you want to come on up, I know you've been talking to the sheriff.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you for the, I hate to delay things, but we did reach him. So here's the proposal, and I know this will apply as much to Ms. Lynn and the county as a school board, so I'm going to try to be clear. As it relates to paragraph 4D, which is what we've called the proportionate share language, we'll agree to the language if we can pull out private donations and federal grants. Therefore, it does not include, you know, the guardian funds that seem to be a topic of interest, or state money, state public funds.
Wait, that's not a federal grant, though. You said...
No, that's not. You're correct. So if that came through, that would be handled, it would be redistributed proportionally as the agreement provides.
You're saying federal dollars would not be?
That is correct.
And I think that one of the times the sheriff was in here, he indicated that he felt that there was some federal funds coming. He referenced that in the public meeting with us. So it seems like if that's a concern of his, then he's convinced federal funds are coming.
There's no tax dollars.
I can't, I don't know. I mean, you're asking.
Tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's what she's saying. That's what.
Federal funds are still tax dollars.
But he's saying he wants to isolate that to being federal funds would be excluded.
The inclusion of the language in there, if it does not exclude federal funds, would prevent his ability to go seek federal grant dollars that would come into Citrus County at no expense to local taxpayers. If this language is in here, then the federal funds will be doled out, but not in Citrus County.
It would be at the expense of the taxpayers.
Yeah, it's my dollars.
Because we're already front paying it now. We're paying the 2.5 million.
Right, if there's a, so you're going to pay 2.5 million. Over and above that, if you want one potential to be for the sheriff to apply for, these programs don't exist yet, so we're talking about something that doesn't exist, but if the federal government comes up with a problem, or a grant to address what they perceive as a problem, which is school safety, and it's available to sheriffs, to school boards, to counties, we can collectively, either of us, apply for it. The sheriff's concern is, if he wants to apply for that grant, and it's a grant for sheriffs, he's going to be precluded from qualifying if he's got an agreement that says he has to give it back to the school board of the county.
So what if then, if those funds come in, there's language that says that then the contract is reduced by the amount that money comes in, so that the local taxpayers get the benefit of that.
Right, then he's not going to get, it's not going to come in. I mean,
well, no, it would still come in because it wouldn't preclude him from having to then do that. It would be then an agreement that he has with the local entities.
My suggestion is this: you don't agree to that. Let private donations. No one applies for a grant for a year unless everybody sits down and talks about it. We all come to some agreement as far as some grant is concerned. But as of right now, there's whatever's out, and we're talking, and Mr. Batzel just said it. There may not be anything out there. We're holding up, as the sheriff put it, one of the most important things to do is protect these kids over monies that may or may not ever be.
Right.
So I don't think that I could personally recommend that.
Okay.
Private donations, I understand. I mean, we have people that
That's
donate
fine.
money to us, but you're arguing over what may or may not be, and what potentially could be a lot of money. I mean,
So one of two, we don't agree on one. What about the second one?
Okay. The second one would be, and I think Ms. Lynn and Mr. Oliver would probably be best to speak to this, but we will agree, beginning October 2018, to do all the work that goes into pulling this out as a separate cost center. And I don't know if that is going to involve a budget amendment or what that would involve, but make it a cost center sooner rather than later, so that all revenues and expenses going in and out can be tracked. And so we'll provide those quarterly reports. Once it is then a separate cost center, it can be, we're going to be quarterly reporting all revenues and expenditures, every debit and credit. And so rather than an additional audit, have that wrapped up in our ordinary annual audit as its own separate cost center. So that's, we're kind of over my head, to be quite honest. I'm no budget guru. I'm just parroting things at this point.
It sounds like we're getting really close. My only concern with my recommendation to the board is my conversation with the clerk of courts, Ms. Vick. So at this point, I can say that I will take it to the board with their, as you know, Ms. Vick is their CFO, their comptroller. In my conversation with her, she talked about the ability to audit as their CFO. So I really can't give you a definitive answer on the audit language, but certainly I appreciate the reporting requirements and the quarterly reports. I can't answer you on the audit without it going before my board and their CFO.
What about the federal?
I couldn't recommend that to my board.
Hold on, I gotta ask you a question on that. Why can't you recommend that on the federal grants? Why would that be, if our board were to decide the 1.1 million with the language of no private donations and federal funds was acceptable, why couldn't the county commission, I mean, wouldn't the money have to come back through the county commission?
I believe that there's a question in general as to whether the sheriff has the ability to get a grant on his own. I really, every other grant since I've been the county attorney, which I've only been there a short time, all the grants have come through the Board of County Commissioners. So the idea that the sheriff can even apply for a grant on his own without the local government, well, I'm not even sure about that. He must believe that he has that ability, and I wouldn't know what he's talking about because, again, it's these hypothetical grant funds that may or may not be out there. So I really can't answer. But if what I'm hearing is, if you put it in the contract and you allow me to get it myself, I'll apply for it. But if you don't allow me to get it by myself, I'm not even going to apply for it. That's the language that troubles me. And my board may say, thank you, Denise, but we're going to do it anyway. I just can't, at this point, do it. I mean, you have to realize my board hasn't even seen this contract yet.
Well, I guess the opposite side of that, though, too, would be if we would find a federal grant, we meaning the school district, that we would apply for some type of security funding through personnel, then that would not be a proportionate share. According to Mr. Batzel, that would be two-way street.
If it's not. If that language isn't in the contract, Mr. Bradshaw and I have that in the contract that we would all share it proportionately no matter what the money is. He's saying
which
that,
is what we are saying too.
Right.
But what I just want to know the options of if we were to allow the sheriff to use that wording that Mr. Batzel told us. You know, for us, we're still talking about $1.1 million. It's you know, that might be something we may have to consider.
Well, here's the hypotheticals on that. I agree with Mr. Bradshaw. We're dealing with speculative things that may happen in the future. And let me go down two different roads. And one, I think you'll say, yeah, that makes total sense. But if he gets a grant for bulletproof vests or cars or things like that, I think we can all sit down and bring any grant back to us, and I think we can agree. Okay, but if he got a grant, for example, for 3 additional SROs, so we get away from the diet plate, if you will, then we all know that grants at some point go away. Okay, when that grant goes away, who is going to be looked to fund it? Those 3 positions. And so I think it needs to be a conscious decision on the front end that everybody knows what we're getting into, because at the federal level, they have all kinds of grants. They have what I call safer grants, which we could get 21 firefighters tomorrow. But the problem is in 3 years that grant goes away and it's got to be funded locally, and we've got to be able to evaluate the financial impact. So I think it's just a matter of working together and communicating, and I think on an individual basis we can work it out. But without any specifics of what we're talking about, you know, I think we're all reasonable people. If it doesn't have a long-term, you know, impact, I don't think we got a problem with it.
And if I may speak to that, that's very well taken, I understand. And so in the back of my mind, the one that comes to mind is Narcan, just because it's a recent grant. So they're very specific. I'm not talking about one that's you know, there are, in my limited experience, wide-ranging grants that say we're going to give you money for school safety. You know, I mean, it's going to be a very specific thing. So if we take Narcan as an example, if we think our SROs in schools need to carry Narcan, and along with the rest of the force and every other deputy, you know, then we just don't want it subject to this. What the contract does is prevent us from applying for that grant because a portion of what comes from it will need to be broken off and repaid to the, because in a way that's money coming to the school resource officer program. And so we just want to be precluded from these things. But that's a well taken point. Look, the answer to that question though is the agency employing the individuals who are no longer grant funded is the one who has the difficult decision to make. So,
Well, I know when I wrote the COPS Universal Hiring Program grant for 10 police officers under the Community Policing Grant Program, the federal grant, it had to have the approval of the county commission because there had to be an agreed upon 4th year funding. You got funding for 3 years and the county commission had to agree to fund at least one full funding cycle. And the county commission had to sign off on that before the sheriff was even allowed to apply for the manpower grant. That was for 10 officers under the COPS program. I would assume, now that's been many years ago. I would assume federal grant processes are very similar. Now, Mr. Oliver brought up the firefighter position. Isn't there a commitment to fund them fully for one budget cycle afterward? That's why there's a question on the funding. So, but wouldn't that be the same way with the sheriff? If the sheriff were to bring forth a grant for a certain amount of officers in addition to the existing school resource officers, typically, isn't that the same process that takes place? Is that they would have to have a commitment from the funding source to fund for another year? Have you known of any grants that are not like that?
I guess what's difficult is we're talking about hypotheticals.
Well, I
It's
know.
so hard.
So maybe it's not that big of a deal, is what I'm saying. If we're talking about hypotheticals, maybe we give the sheriff his opportunity to apply for federal grants. Again, I think the reasoning is flawed because I would like to think the grants would be applied for even if it weren't all going to one person or one agency. I would hope the teamwork would be we're all in this together. But that's, to me, if it's hypothetical, then it's not that big of a deal.
Well, this is a collaborative process, like in Narcan. I totally agree. I think that's great. If they can get it, got no issue with it. And I mean, I think the school board and the board of county commissioners would be fine with that, okay? And I don't see it, but I think that we've got to make sure that, you know, for example, they applied for a JAG grant, the board approved it, they had to sign off on it, and that's something that happens every year. So I agree with Ms. Lynn. I personally believe that they've got to get approval of the Board of County Commissioners, but I can't say that's absolutely true, I don't know. But all I'm saying is that I would ask that everybody just work collaboratively together, because we don't know what may come up. I mean, the one thing on the Aaron Feist money, for example, under Senate Bill 7026, the Aaron Feist money, and originally, if you recall, Senator Negron thought that money was going to be divided up and come back exactly the same way into the SRO program, but the bill says it goes to the sheriff's office.
But that's not the point of contention.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying,
You've
though.
got that settled. He's going to do proportionate share on that.
I understand that, but that's why I'm saying we're dealing with things we don't know enough about yet, or what the specific type of grant is, and every grant is different, to be honest.
Is there a way, because and I know this has gotten complicated again, and I would agree with Mr. Dodd that we're trying to fix a problem that yet hasn't really happened, and you know, it's not a bad thing to some extent if it could happen. I hear what the sheriff's office is saying. We want to be able to apply potentially for grants to be able to further enhance the program. Is there, at the same time, the government agencies that have to fund it is saying, we're already saying we're well past our funding limits, so our concerns are how do we recoup any of those resources in the future if, you know, we do get some resources that comes through. Like you're saying, we can't get them if you can't even apply for them. Is there some language, maybe it's elsewhere in the contract, that could say that if additional resources comes in, they could offset the monthly billables for that, so that if there's a windfall, we could then say, proportionally we're gonna adjust those then, but they don't necessarily tie to the situation of him getting grant monies,
My
or
suggestion
applying for grant monies.
would be to add the provision, the board's agreed to act cooperatively as it relates to grants. Because as I say, if it's a grant for capital, it doesn't matter to me, but the awkward position you're gonna be put into and the county's gonna be put into is if there's a grant out there, which I don't know if this is eligible for a SAFER grant, but SAFER grants are pretty popular and they may make them eligible, I don't know. But a SAFER grant typically is 75, 75, I think it's 35 or 25, and then 0 in the 4th year. But then the question's gonna come back to the county and the board in 4 years. Are you willing to make our situation less safe because we don't have it and you didn't have any benefit to the discussion on the front end?
Agree. I agree.
Remember, this is a one-year contract.
No, I agree, that's why.
So, you get a grant, I mean, to me, it would have to all get used up this year. Because
You know,
we
A
don't.
SAFER grant's a 3-year grant.
Right, but we're in a one-year contract. Because all of our contracts are gonna be 1 year have an out clause, because we can't appropriate monies we don't have for the next budget. We don't know what our budget will be.
I just had a thought, and I think it's almost left me already. But if the sheriff is saying that he wants this latitude to apply for grants to enhance the service, then maybe we could put some kind of language in there that it truly would be something in addition to what we're already getting. In other words, they can't replace something that he's already in his budget, or it would have to be something truly over and above what you're already getting.
And the language would have to include that he couldn't encumber the
Yeah.
county commissioner or us. So I'm not happy with the way it's coming back, so that might be 2 out of 2.
Yeah, I don't think, we don't have a problem with limiting it to capital. We're not talking about SAFER grants for personnel and long-term commitments. So the way those grants, and every grant is different, but the way those grants come through, they either come through like you described, which is, if there's going to be a second party on the hook at the end of the grant cycle, then they want that assurance from that secondary governmental entity or party. So that the terms of the grant are going to may require that. If they don't, the other thing they're going to require is that whoever the grantee is going to certify that the funds are going to be used in the manner set forth in the grant. So our problem is we can't go apply for a grant for Narcan or something that would bring down in year 2, or I'm going to go back to vehicles, okay? Because I know the sheriff would love to find a grant for vehicles. What that would do, if he can go find a federal grant that would provide the money to make a capital expenditure for vehicles, that would not be those would not have to be purchased out of the county's coffers or the school board's coffers, and thereby would reduce that ongoing lease expense for the next 10 years during the life of the vehicle. That's a win-win-win for everybody. So what I'm saying is, if we want to restrict it to federal grants for capital expenditures, I think Danny told me I could do that as the second in command at the moment. So we're okay with that. That's reasonable. I understand the concern.
I think that's a good idea.
I like Mr. Oliver's language where I'd like to see the grant stricken since it's a hypothetical. I don't think it should be part of this contract, and that any grants applied should be collaborative if it deals with the SRO program, because the SRO program is a tri-contract. And so I think if he finds a grant a year from now, I think if we have to be a partner, county commissioners have to be a partner, then we can do it collaboratively, but I don't think it should be part of this contract.
And the vehicles, see, I get that, and I hope the sheriff can find some of those grant opportunities, but for example, very few, if any, school districts are paying for any capital as part of their SRO contracts. I have made it clear that in my opinion, I don't believe that we should be showing any capital as part of our costs in our SRO contract, that we're contracting for service. So the trouble is, though, is if that service level is set at X dollar amount because the sheriff is including multiple vehicles for the SRO program that he's going to go and get somewhere else, if that savings is to that department, how would that savings flow down to us other than through a new contract negotiated? At this point, I don't know that we've seen that willingness. We've seen the number keep going up, not that the number is said, we'll adjust that if we can find out it's cheaper. I would love to see that, but I don't know that we've seen that. And that's where I'm saying, it's great, go get the grants. We all, I think, want the sheriff to be able to reduce the costs of the program so that we can either continue to provide this level of service or expand upon it. But at some point, we still, from the state, only receive X dollars. And unfortunately, we aren't in a position where we have the constitutional authority to mandate a tax onto the citizens of our community in order to fund that level. School boards don't have that. The legislature determines that level. So we are in a quandary as to how to address that. I think we all want to work to say, we don't want to hinder it, but at the same time, how do we account for that money to say, if it reduces the cost of the program by having that grant, where does that get shown to us? How does that flow back to us?
Yeah, since it's a one-year agreement, I hate to keep beating this horse, but I mean, I'm going to use it as an example. You know, if for instance we were able to get some capital that brought down the ongoing carrying costs, operational costs of the program, when we come to you in year 2, instead of just rolling over the number, we need to justify, you know, what the number is, and just like we do with the county in the budget process. And if we were able to buy those vehicles, then you don't have a lease expense. You know, we all save the lease expense.
We shouldn't have a lease expense anyway. Because again, we're purchasing a service, we're not purchasing the equipment.
Okay, well.
And that still has become, I think, an issue that we've struggled from day one with. And again, I think the legislature may step in before this is all over in the next year, because that's an issue.
No,
because we can't give you money when it comes to our audits if we don't own it for capital. And I believe that we've been told that.
Well, okay, so let's move on with this. So the issue then is going to be the federal grants for capital, and we may have to decide on that, board members, but right now it sounds to me like the wording would be private donations and federal grants for capital. Is that right, Mr. Betzel?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's the first item. So everything else with proportionate share, with state funding, all those other things are going to be agreed upon. So let's go to the second item, is the...
The county's not agreeing.
I know, but the county's going to have to take it to their commission and make the decision. So let's go to the second item, is on the accounting. So the sheriff agrees to move that to October 1 of 2018. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We'll create a cost center and independently report that cost center through revenue and expense reports beginning October 2018. We'll then provide quarterly, expense reports throughout the duration of the contract.
And that will be both to the commission and to the school board?
Sure.
Okay, and then the October 1, the first report that's due on October 1 will include from the July 1 part of the contract?
You gotta give us time to break this out into its own separate cost center. It's not as simple as going in there and boom, it's in its own cost center, because everything that goes with an SRO or goes with the deputy sheriff has to be brought over into its own cost center. So it's a little more complex than that,
Okay.
but we can get it done by October of 2018, and then we can start rolling with the process of reporting.
Okay. Now, Mr. Bradshaw, on that paragraph 9 on page 16, then, if that were to be changed to October 1, 2018, what else is your recommendation for us?
I think Ms. Lynn requested the original language that we had in there, just setting the date at October 1, 2018 for the reporting to start.
Okay. And we're good with the quarterly revenue and expense reports, which you've agreed to also.
You have in
Yes.
2019 on page 4, in the top paragraph of page 4 too.
Thank you, Ms. Kels.
I'm sorry. I think you're looking at the draft from today. My language was a prior version that Mr. Bradshaw read.
And we're going to redo this one
That's,
today.
yeah. It is on page 4, effective October 1, 2019. That'll be changed, right?
Well, that paragraph is amended otherwise from my language that Mr. Bradshaw read to you.
It's tied in somehow. Your change is tied in, Ms. Denise.
it's in a previous version that Mr. Bradshaw read earlier.
So, Mr. Batzel, then on page 4, the first paragraph, that will be changed effective October 1, 2018, is that correct also?
That's fine. Yes, sir.
Not
Yes.
that language. Not the language that you're looking at, the language
It's
that we
Lynn's
have in the
language.
previous version.
And then that's the
Is
same
that right,
language
Mr.
that
Batzel?
was 16.
That's what you're agreeing to? I don't have the previous version in front of me.
Would you like to see mine, Mr. Dodge?
Sure.
I've read it several times. Is this the accounting and the auditing portion?
It was on,
That's the previous version.
this was under financial management here.
Which one are you looking for?
On page 3 of 25, financial management. That's what Ms. Council pointed out. Starting and then it goes to page 4, at the top of page 4.
No, that's how, that was right.
Yeah, not the one on 16, it's the date change, that's
That's just gonna be the date change.
on financial management.
Denise, under the original paragraph 4, we had effective October 1, 2019. He'll move it into a cost center.
I'm sorry. He was getting sidetracked. So you do that one more time.
In the original paragraph 4, before you get to 4A, it says effective October 1, 2019, the sheriff will account for the SR codes under this agreement in a separate department cost center. I guess that would have to change to 18 also.
Yes.
And yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was like 12 versions ago that we.
Yeah. Well, and I was asking Randy how that affects his budget process.
Okay, so this, actually, I'm gonna let Mr. Bradshaw read it because I know he had some notes here. So you're saying that we would, that this is what the sheriff will agree to, just,
That the parties agree the funds paid pursuant to this agreement are restricted for the payment of expenses related to the SRO program, and the sheriff will provide detailed quarterly revenue and expense reports and reserve balance reports for the funds paid pursuant to this agreement to the county and the school district beginning October 1, 2018. These reports will encompass the restricted funds paid pursuant to this agreement. The provision allows for the SRO funds to be audited, but in no event shall such audit occur more frequently than once per year.
Okay, yes, with a couple of revisions that I'll go through. There's 3 of them. One is we cut the reserve balance reports. There are no reserve balances. Is it? And
It could be, if revenues exceed expenses, or vice
It's gonna be in the cost center fund, and I'm not the financial wizard, I don't understand what you're saying about reserves, but we don't keep reserves at the sheriff's office, correct? So you're
Yeah,
just
I mean-
talking about in the cost center itself, it'll show the expenses that go out, or whatever
versa.
it is. that-
It's highly unlikely that the expenses and the revenues will exactly be,
Right, you're exactly right, so, yes.
and whatever's left is
Yeah,
considered the reserve fund.
okay.
okay. All right, then we'll strike my comment. We'll move on.
Okay.
At the end of the paragraph about those quarterly reports, after county and the school district, I had added produced by the accounting software and systems used by the sheriff. I'm told we have different systems, and sometimes that becomes an issue. We're going to we have an obligation to provide revenue, expense, and reserve reports. I understand that. We just don't have to go buy new software and migrate things. I mean,
They use the same software. They use Funimation, you all use Funimation.
Pretty-
well, then that, and my suggestion would not cause an issue if that's the case, because it wouldn't.
It's the same accounting.
Yeah,
software.
we just wanna make things efficient, where we can run this report and get it to everybody. We don't wanna have to make it a big process where we use this.
Yeah, so my recommendation, if you know the software we use and you're okay with it, would not be a problem, correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
It sounds like we use the same software.
Thank you. All right, and then the third and final was just, like I mentioned before, based on the fact that we're now providing these detailed revenue, expense, and reserve reports throughout the year quarterly, and it's in a different cost center, strike the last sentence of that paragraph requiring an additional audit, because that will be audited together with all other funds and cost centers of the sheriff's office.
disagree that it will be part of the other audit, because as I showed you, the CAFR does not include the SRO. And I also have to say that, and I guess they're saying that when it changes to a different cost center, that might be different. However, I had the conversation with the clerk where she said that I needed to be persistent in keeping that audit language in there. So as the CFO for the board, so that's something I would have to take to the board before I could agree to do that.
So is my, poor Ms. Lynn and I are both reporting on budget stuff that I don't know, I'll tell you that. So I'm told this, that if we create the separate cost center, then at that point, it will show up on that, the report, the auditor's report from a year or two ago, she's correct, doesn't have school resource officer program on it. Now that it's a separate cost center, it will, is what I'm told. So.
We should have two mics. I'm going to go back to Mr. Kennedy's comments earlier. Mr. Kennedy's comments were that we are not including capital because we are buying a service, basically. And just like the school board is buying a service from the sheriff, the county will be contributing to you buying that service. So it is not part of the sheriff's law enforcement budget that gets audited as part of the CAFR. This needs to be separate and apart under a separate contract, that the contract can be audited. Not the sheriff, not the sheriff's budget, it's the contract needs to be audited. And that's where the financial people at the clerk's office stressed to me to keep this language in here. So I'm happy to take it to my board with the clerk sitting there, and then the clerk can give her input to the board as well.
Ms. Denise, can you answer on the cost center as you're seeing it? Because that's my question. Will, or do you envision that there's a separate between capital and operational breakouts of that cost center?
We preferred the term fund. I was told to put the word fund in there. In negotiations, I lost that one. it turned to cost center / department. And I believe that under the cost center, that it would be broken out between capital and operational, and I think Mr. Oliver would shake his head and disagree if necessary.
A lease is reported as an operating expense, it's not reported as a capital expense. It somewhat depends on the type of lease, and I won't go into that, but there's what's called an operating lease and a capital lease. You all probably have copiers that you've leased that you own at the end of the lease term for $1, and those are considered in accounting jargon capital leases, okay? However, if you have what's called a pure lease, where at the end of the term you buy it for the fair market value, that's called a true lease, and that's treated as an operating expense, just like you rent a car from Avis or Hertz.
And I wouldn't disagree with anything you just said, which is why the complexity of those cost center reporting, that leaves open that nearly all the capital expenses could not be captured as part of any of the operations of that contract, because there is no accounting of that. And so, and that's kind of been, to me, a challenge with the whole.
This is true, but I do not know how they're proposing to procure this, whether they're whether they're a capital lease or whether they're an operating lease. And if they're a capital lease, then they would track it that way, and it will become more, it would be reflected on the balance sheet as a liability within a fund. But if it's an operating lease, it will just say operating expense.
But I think the assumption is we're only talking about vehicles, but it's my understanding there's a lot of other capital costs that are being looked at, such as weapons and other types of equipment, which we might think of as, well, that's the cost of the business of if you're providing that service. But the assumption has been that those costs have now been directly associated with this contract, and yet they wouldn't be captured as part of the cost.
Yeah, we're not privy to that. We don't know. I mean, that'd be better for somebody from the sheriff's office to speak to that.
And I think, in my layman's terms, I think the root of that is part of the challenge that we're going to have, or our budget folks are gonna have, which is going back and out of all these different cost centers, you know, pulling out the 12 badges and belts and firearms and, you know, and vehicle and everything else that that are SRO program expenses, but are now categorized in a number of different buckets.
All right, Ms. Himmel has a question.
We've battled this a long time, and my question to Mr. Bachelor, you may not have this answer. What is the big deal about the last sentence about one more audit, no more than once a year? We're all trying to be transparent, we're all elected, sheriff's elected, county commissioners are elected. Why are we afraid to tell our taxpayers that, why are we telling our taxpayers we don't want to be audited all the time?
It's not that we're afraid of the transparency. We're already extremely transparent, and per the legislature's requirements to be audited, we're already audited. The issue is that on a finite amount of resources, when we pay overtime to a number of people to go count numbers, we are providing one less deputy on the road. We are providing a lower level of service as an agency. It's a bureaucratic sort of layer of unnecessary oversight when we're already audited, and we're agreeing, I'm here to agree to provide detailed revenue, expense, and reserve reports that are going to track every dollar that comes in and out quarterly. So I think a fair-minded third party would say that is transparent. I mean, I'm trying to be transparent. I'm just trying to avoid the onerous extra audit, which truly, you know, we're not staffed as thoroughly, I don't believe, as the school board in the county as it relates to.
Well, we also have 2,200 employees compared to how many employees they have. We've got teachers that are in and out all the time, and they're tracking for comp time, overtime, and even the time they don't get paid, they're here all the time. I will not recommend to the school board, if you want my opinion, that we take that lesson.
And I think
Okay.
the purpose of an annual audit is an independent person taking a look at how you have managed the tax dollars of the citizens of Citrus County. And all of us do that. And I can't agree with that. But if you're not gonna be audited on how you're gonna spend this amount of money from our taxpayers, this is 2 out of 2. I'm ready.
Do you know if the sheriff is he watching this public meeting?
No, he's a prior.
So, okay,
Yeah.
but you can get him on the phone if we wanted to do a conference call. Could you get him on the phone?
Possibly.
Yeah, we'd be able
Okay,
to try.
so this, we're coming down to decision time here. We have 2 issues now. The federal grants for capital. For me, I don't have a problem with putting that in there and allowing the sheriff to go after federal grants for capital. Ms. Council, you mentioned you don't like that. I think Mr. Bradshaw doesn't advise that. So let's look at that point first. And if one of these is going to be a fatal flaw, we'll give the sheriff one more chance to say, hey, I'll come to the table. I mean, and maybe make some compromise here, which, you know, we'd like to see because we want to make this work. But then the second item is the audit. And Mrs. Himmel, you said you're advising the board that we stay with the audit process. Okay.
I don't see how you can ignore an audit, an independent audit for tax dollars.
So we are audited. Every constitutional
Okay.
officer in the state is audited per Florida statute. We are audited regularly. And in addition to that audit,
We're-
we are now.
Okay, we're going to get to the audit in just a minute, but right now I'm talking about the federal grants for capital. So board, and Mr. Bradshaw, is this something we need to vote on, or can we just get a consensus? Okay.
Just a consensus.
Okay, so what is the consensus of the federal grants for capital? Are we going to allow that to be in the contract for the sheriff to go after his own federal grants for capital with no requirement for a proportionate share?
My problem with that is that the money that we're being charged, what the county commission is paying, what we're paying, the 1.1108, involves the sheriff spending capital. He's made no bones about the fact that he's buying cars, he's buying guns, he's buying helmets, he's buying this, he's buying that. So he's spending our tax dollars on capital improvements. So if he gets a federal grant, then I think we ought to share it proportionately, and we ought to get some reimbursement for money that we've already spent for that.
Okay.
Should
I
it be a
tend to
difference?
concur with that.
Okay, you concur with Ms. Counts?
I do, and I think that from what I'm hearing from the county, their recommendation is going to be in the same fashion, that they see those same things, and I'm seeing nodding heads. So if we disagree with that, we have to also be very realistic to say that you're going to have to then make an appeal to the commission to even agree with that.
Well, the question first would be between us and the sheriff.
No, I'm saying, but if
And
we,
then-
even if we then
Right.
said that we
That's
could
true.
treat differently,
Yeah.
then
County
somebody's gonna have to make an
commissioners
appeal to the
Right.
commissioners, so.
Okay, Ms. Powers?
I think the grants ought to be tri-party.
Okay. Okay, so the consensus of the board is that that will not be acceptable on the federal grants. I mean, and we want to be a collaborative in this. It's very basic. I mean, please let the sheriff know, we want to work together as a team. Everybody's after the same goal of protecting kids. Let's not let that be the fatal flaw. So you'll have to find out from the sheriff about that. Now, the next item is the audit. And again, board members, I gotta tell you, this is really between the sheriff and the county commission.
I know.
It's really not our place right now. We're giving them the money. We agree to audit of our funds. We agree to pure transparency of our funds. Sheriff does have a constitutional exclusion. I don't know if it's exclusion or a constitutional reason why he does things the way he does. So the next question is for the board. Do we want to pursue the requirement that there be an audit, an annual audit?
I think it's important for us to support the county commissioners in this.
Yeah, my issue that I still have is, and Mr. Oliver even said, I don't have an answer for that. And that has to do with, we know in this contract, there are costs that that are built into the costs that are capital costs. I've heard they've been upfront costs, I believe there'll be recurring capital costs, but at the point, it's in the system, it's in the contract is that. But we're not gonna have any idea. I mean, the county is saying they're not really gonna know what costs are what.
Okay.
So I think that does become an issue to say, well, we can't just say it's a county-only issue.
Okay.
We're impacted by it.
Okay. My thoughts on that is we let that be a decision between the sheriff and the county commission. That if he wants to keep the wording in there, that they'll give quarterly reports, that to me is good enough. Ms. Counts, it's not. Mr. Kennedy? what is your-
I
your
really
thoughts?
have
Your
concerns
thoughts?
because
Okay.
I'm still, if the quarterly reports will
Okay.
not break out capital
Yes.
and will not break, it probably will have to come down to, I would think an audit is maybe at that point, at the end of the year, will that produce that?
Okay.
And if that does, then the problem is then I'm saying, yes, I believe we do. I also would agree with Ms. Counts. The county has stepped up for us. Do we now say that this is just an issue between the county and the sheriff? I don't think we should. They've stood with us. I don't think we now say, well, it's not our problem, it's theirs. And I don't know that that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying, I do feel an obligation to
My
them.
thoughts are maybe there's enough information in the quarterly requirement that the sheriff's going to agree to not to have to require another audit. I don't like the fact that the audit that you showed us doesn't break down any SRO costs. And I guess that's what, Mr. Batzel, you said the sheriff does every year, but yet you can't see where the SRO costs are in that audit. So it does
There was
conf-
a separate cost center.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I
Dave.
kind of want to speak to that
Mhm.
too, because it wasn't in the separate cost center, therefore it wasn't in the financial report. But
Okay.
overall, as an agency, everything that we did was audited, which occurs every year. With this new breakdown that we're going to put it in its own cost center, and I'm going to get a definitive answer for you, but it appears that everything that goes along with an SRO, everything I'm wearing today, uniform, gun belt, shoes, whatever it may be, will be in their own cost center at that point. They were in other buckets, of course, because underneath fleet, how many vehicles do we have? They were all underneath fleet, that's not underneath SRO. So that's just an easy explanation, and maybe an example of it, that it
So-
wasn't broke down into specifics, but we're trying to get there to get this agreement done, because I don't think the idea of a police force is a very good one, and I won't go there yet.
Right.
But
So,
I
but
know
you're
what would
saying
it take to run one.
that it will show in that audit then, is that what you're saying, Major Leonard?
Yes, that's what and basically I'm trying to get that definitive answer right now, but I think everything associated with the SRO program is now going to be in its own cost center. So therefore, there's no need to do an audit in itself, subject the agency to two different audits when it's going to be audited underneath one. And it'll show it.
So again, my feelings, has your feelings changed any, either one of you two?
If I'm hearing you correctly, and I'm saying this, I'm asking this question also for the county's benefit as well, is that if you're saying that cost center will just automatically be part of what the end of the year audit, You're saying that it's going to produce all of that information,
It'll be there.
and it's gonna be there, then there's two questions. One, if it's gonna be there, then yeah, my answer would be, well, then it's gonna be there. And if it's gonna be there, then what does it matter if it's in the contract or not?
That's kind of my point to the whole thing, is that it.
But no, I'm saying then why is there a problem on the sheriff's side if we're just saying, we're just looking for that assurance?
Because the sheriff is not going to subject himself to two separate independent audits. We already get one, it does the agency as a whole. Now that we're breaking it into a separate cost center, this audit's going to encompass it. It's going to show it. They're going to go
But
over.
because we're saying we don't know that you're not been able to show us that, we're just saying, I mean, would it not suffice within the contract that if at the end that information was in the audit, then that sufficed, that met the obligation of the contract. We're not asking for a separate audit as much as we are saying that audit has to include the SRO information. So if their audit includes it, they would have met that under our contract. And if it doesn't, then you would be subjective to that, I would think.
I think it's a county though, that the requirements they have and your requirements have to be met. It's not our determination to say anything is yours.
My board requires that when I do a contract for services, that it includes the audit language in there. And if you look at the language, it doesn't say there will be an audit. It says it allows the records to be audited. I guess you can say at the end of that, if necessary. So if the new way of doing it shows all of these things, then the county wouldn't spend their money on hiring an auditor to do it, or the internal auditors wouldn't waste their time doing it if it was all. This is just kind of like a belt and suspenders kind of thing, since we don't know and we haven't had the transparency with regard to the SRO contract in the past. If y'all remember, a lot of this started with the fact that the SRO contract was different from what was being reported to the Board of County Commissioners, and I believe that that's going to be fresh in the commissioners' minds. So that's why I am on their behalf trying to make sure that this is in there. So we're not saying for sure there's going to be an audit, it's just, the language is like, it will allow the fund to be audited.
So then, for our purposes then, it seems like we could interpret that if that information's in there, we're done.
Yeah.
So, I don't see where there's the issue then.
It doesn't require an
That's
audit.
required.
Yeah, I mean, if the
Yeah, that's
cost
very
center
good.
approach works and that suffices with what the county needs and everything, then why would we don't?
None of us, I think, want duplicated service, to duplicate anything.
No, I think we could, yeah, I think we could put some language in there that basically provides that together with the annual audit of the sheriff's office per statute and, et cetera, that the SRO program funds will be audited. I mean, as long as it's clear that it's one and the same audit, and that my assumption is correct in that the cost center will be audited along with every other cost center.
You have a comment to make?
I appreciate the suggestion, but it's not. It's two different things. We have an internal auditor, which is the clerk, and we do various internal audits every year, from fire to the landfill to animal services. And every year the clerk embarks upon a conference with staff and decides which funds or that was an incorrect statement, not which funds, but which contracts are going to be audited that year. And so the clerk wants that language in there from her standpoint to determine what she's going to audit, and it would be separate and apart from the annual audit. But if you wanted to add the words "if necessary," or "if the county deems necessary," or if any party deems it necessary to make it equal, then it wouldn't be a requirement every year, but just if it's necessary.
Okay, what do you think about that, Mr. Batsell? If necessary by, or would you say if requested? What was that again? If any
party deems it
If any party deems necessary.
And,
No more than once a year.
yeah, I do not think I'm going to be able to make an additional audit fly. The audit that we undergo is, I know you all disagree, but is appropriate in the eyes of the legislature that governs constitutional officers in the state. We are not a third-party vendor being hired to provide services. This is more akin to, so within the sheriff's budget, we do certain things for judicial, your bailiffs, and that is just a separate department or cost center. It's not audited. It's because what it is, it's part of the sheriff's role in keeping this county safe. Where these deputies are doing their job is important, but it shouldn't subject us to layers of scrutiny depending on where they work. Some work in schools, some work in courtrooms, and some are on the roads, etc. There are a lot of different places.
Okay, thank you. So what we need to decide then, board, again, we got to come back to this. Are we going to, for our agreement, do we say we keep the audit requirement in there with the wording that was just mentioned, or do we take it out and not make it a point? Ms. Council, have you changed your mind?
Keep it with this language.
Okay.
I'd say to keep it in, and my concern that I think we need to remind ourselves is we can continue to negotiate this as we're trying to, and I appreciate all the parties, but if our objective is to leave today's meeting with either a signed contract or going in a different direction, then if the county is saying they're not going to agree to that, then we can agree to anything at this point, but it's not going to happen, and we're going to then either find ourselves 2 days from or 3 days from now having to have another special meeting. So we have to be realistic when it comes to the fact that we can again agree or disagree with each other, but if the county is going to have an issue with that, we're not going to come to a contract that they can submit tomorrow that the commissioners will be agreeable to sign so that we can move forward.
Okay, but you heard what Mr. Batzel said. He said the sheriff's not going to agree to that. I mean, I think,
No,
I'm going to ask if we can get the sheriff on the phone here in a minute. I really am, because that's where we're at with this, before we have
I
to.
heard the county saying they won't agree to it.
That's what I'm saying.
Pick a side. We gotta pick a side. We either have to agree with the county or agree with the sheriff.
No, we're going to do.
Okay,
For
Ms.
part of the
Powers.
county, we have to tell the county, yes, you know, we'll follow what the state tells you to do. We're not going to oppose you. We appreciate what you're doing. So that we only have one choice there.
Okay. Okay. So those are the two issues that we need to talk to. We need to get the sheriff to tell us about if he'll agree to only the private donations will not have proportionate share, and the fact that we do want a required audit as deemed necessary, or if necessary.
And what time is your meeting expected to be over tomorrow?
No,
This one's only been going for 3 hours.
I appreciate that. I don't think we have an extremely heavy agenda tomorrow.
Okay, so
But that could mean probably, it starts at 1 and it would be over, I would say, around, on or before 5.
Okay.
Oh, we have a 5:01, but most of the business of the meeting will be done before 5.
But I'm saying if we could, if we're talking about a special meeting and maybe looking at a contract, because you gotta have time to redraft this thing, could all of us,
It would be Friday would be the earliest we could have. We posted a special meeting tomorrow. It's 3 days, so it would be Friday.
could we attend the commissioners' meeting tomorrow?
No.
Well, let's wait. Let's.
We can talk logistics after.
Yeah, we can talk logistics next. Okay, so Mr. Batzel, we would be more than happy to have you get the sheriff on speaker so we could ask him those questions. I mean, we have been at this 3 hours. Certainly would hope he could take time to discuss the matter with us, and then, you know, knowing that if there's an issue, we're going to have to move forward with the other agenda items.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
What would you prefer to do?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought
You
my
would give a
first
five.
to run out and call the sheriff.
Yes, that'll be good.
I think we
So,
can take a break and let
Well,
him get the sheriff
okay,
where.
yeah.
I'll do my, I know this, if he can make it happen, he certainly will. I can't, part of representing the sheriff is you can't always say where they are and what they're up to, but I know he'll make it there if he can.
okay, that's fine. You can, if you want to do that. Mrs. Himmel suggests that board members that we look at item B, which is the school crossing guards, school traffic control, approve the contract. And so,
Is there any issues on, no concerns on superintendent or legal side? Move approval?
This is something we before out. Yeah, this is the same thing we've had, no change.
all right, motion by Mr. Kennedy, second by Ms. Bryant to approve the agreement between the school board and the sheriff's office for traffic control.
The only thing I would just say is, is perhaps does there need to be an amendment to that subject to item A?
It's a separate one.
I know, but are we, right, but if for some reason we had to go to item C, are we actually needing to then, because they're on the other,
Because they're standing in the middle of
okay, got it,
we only have
got it,
jurisdiction within inside the.
I'm good.
Okay, are there any other questions or discussion on this with the school traffic control?
Should we go ahead and move to?
We- We have a motion on item B and a second. We have a motion by Mr. Kennedy, second by Ms. Bryant. So, on item B. So is there any other discussion on item B? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes 4-0. Okay, I'm sorry, 5-0, thank you. That's 4, 6. So we will, 15? All right, we'll recess the meeting until 4:15.